I never thought I would be standing in my driveway at 7 in the morning watching a county inspector slap a bright orange cease and desist order on the brand new pool house behind the HOA president's mansion. But here we were. The expression on Patricia Remington's face was worth every second of the sleepless nights I'd spent documenting her illegal construction project. My name is Andrew Williams, and I'd lived in Sunset Ridge Estates in Scottsdale, Arizona for 3 years. It was one of those planned communities where every mailbox looked identical and the HOA measured your grass height with actual rulers. Patricia Remington had been the HOA president for the last 5 years, ruling our neighborhood with an iron fist and a laminated copy of the covenant restrictions that she wielded like a weapon. The whole mess started 6 months ago when I noticed construction equipment rolling into the community common area behind Patricia's house. She lived in the largest home in the development, a sprawling Mediterranean-style villa that backed up to the shared amenities area where our community pool sat. I was heading out for my morning run when I saw the excavators tearing up ground about 50 feet from the existing pool. I jogged over to where a construction crew was marking off a large rectangular area with stakes and bright orange string. A foreman in a hard hat was studying some blueprints. "Excuse me," I called out. "What's being built here?" The foreman glanced up. "Pool house, nice one too. Got changing rooms, bathrooms, kitchenette, covered patio. Should be done in about 3 months. I nodded slowly. "Did the HOA approve this?" He laughed. "The HOA commissioned it. Lady who runs it lives right there." He gestured toward Patricia's house. "Says the community's been needing proper facilities for years." That part was actually true. Our existing pool had a tiny cinderblock bathroom that smelled like chlorine and mildew, and no real shelter from Arizona's brutal summer sun. A proper pool house would be a genuine improvement, but something felt off about the whole situation. I went home and pulled up the HOA portal on my laptop. Sure enough, there was a notice about the pool house construction, dated 2 weeks prior. The notice stated that the HOA board had unanimously approved the project at their monthly meeting, with construction beginning immediately. The estimated cost was $175,000 to be paid from the Community Reserve Fund. What the notice didn't include was any mention of homeowner input, architectural review, or most importantly, county permits. I'd been on the receiving end of Patricia's enforcement crusade enough times to know exactly how the permitting process worked. 2 years ago, I'd wanted to add a small pergola to my backyard patio. Patricia had personally delivered a violation notice to my door within 48 hours, informing me that I needed HOA architectural approval before beginning any exterior modifications. The application process took 6 weeks, required detailed plans, and cost me $300 in review fees. Then, I'd had to pull permits from Maricopa County, which took another month and several $100s more. The pergola was 10 feet by 10 feet and cost me $4,000 total. This pool house was a major structure, and I'd seen nothing about county permits. I called the Maricopa County Development Services Department that afternoon. A bored-sounding clerk answered on the 4th ring. "Hi, I'm calling to inquire about permits for a construction project in my community," I said. "Sunset Ridge Estates in Scottsdale." "Address?" I gave her the address of the community common area. I heard typing. "What kind of project?" "A pool house. Pretty substantial structure from what I've seen." More typing. A long pause. "I'm not showing any active permits for that address. What's the owner's name?" "The Sunset Ridge Estates, HOA. Patricia Remington is the president." "Hold on." The hold music was a tinny version of a classical piece I didn't recognize. After 2 minutes, she came back. "Yeah, we don't have anything filed for that location. If they're doing major construction without permits, that's a violation. You want to file a complaint?" "I'm just trying to understand if maybe the permits are under a different address or name," I said carefully. "Not unless you give me something else to search. But if you're seeing active construction for a new building and we don't have permits on file, somebody's breaking county code." I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. Patricia Remington, who'd threatened to fine me $500 when my lawn exceeded the approved height by half an inch, was building a massive structure without proper permits. Over the next week, I watched the construction progress. The crew worked fast, pouring a substantial concrete foundation and beginning to frame out what was clearly going to be a sizable building. I started taking photos and videos, documenting everything with timestamps. At the next HOA meeting, I showed up with a folder full of printed documentation. The meetings were held in Patricia's house, in her formal dining room that she'd converted into a boardroom complete with a mahogany table that sat 12 people. Only about 8 homeowners typically attended these meetings. Patricia liked it that way. She sat at the head of the table, her blonde hair sprayed into an immovable helmet, wearing a navy blazer that screamed middle management. Her vice president, Carol Murphy, sat to her right, nodding at everything Patricia said like a dashboard bobblehead. The treasurer, Dennis Hart, sat on her left, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "The meeting will now come to order," Patricia announced, rapping her knuckles on the table. "First order of business, lawn violations. Mr. Williams, your grass was measured at 3.2 inches on Tuesday. The approved height is 3 inches maximum." I took a deep breath. "Patricia, I'm actually here to discuss the pool house construction." Her expression froze, her smile becoming strained. "That matter has already been approved by the board." "I'm sure it has," I said evenly. "But I called Maricopa County, and they have no record of permits for this construction." The room went silent. Carol's mouth formed a small O. Dennis suddenly looked very interested in his notepad. Patricia's face flushed red. "The board approved this project unanimously. We have every right to improve community amenities." "Absolutely," I agreed. "But Arizona law requires permits for any structure over 200 square feet. That pool house looks like it's going to be at least 1,500 square feet." "We don't need permits for improvements within our own community," Patricia snapped. I pulled out printed pages from my folder. "Actually, according to Maricopa County Code Section 2114, any new construction requires permits regardless of whether it's residential, commercial, or HOA owned. I have the relevant sections highlighted here." I slid the papers across the table. Patricia didn't even look at them. "This is a homeowner meeting, not a legal proceeding," she said coldly. "If you have concerns, you can submit them in writing to the board." "I'm submitting them verbally right now," I pressed. "We're spending $175,000 from the reserve fund on a structure that's being built illegally. If the county finds out, we could be facing serious fines, mandatory demolition, or both. That affects every homeowner here." Another homeowner, Maria Chen, spoke up. "Is that true? Could they make us tear it down?" "This is fear-mongering," Patricia declared, standing up abruptly. "Andrew has consistently demonstrated hostility toward this board's decisions. He's upset because we hold him accountable for violations like everyone else." "I'm upset because you're breaking the law," I shot back. "The same law you've used to threaten dozens of homeowners in this community." "This meeting is adjourned," Patricia announced. "Carol, please note that Mr. Williams was disruptive and argumentative." "You can't just adjourn because you don't like what I'm saying," I protested, but Patricia was already walking out, Carol scurrying behind her. Dennis gave me an apologetic look and shrugged. I sat there with the remaining homeowners, frustrated but not surprised. Maria leaned over. "Is this really illegal?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "Completely. I can show you the county codes." "What are you going to do?" That was the question. I could report them to the county directly, but that felt like nuclear option. Despite Patricia's tyranny, I didn't want to cause problems for the whole community if it could be avoided. I decided to try one more time to resolve it directly. The next morning, I went to Patricia's house and rang the doorbell. She answered wearing a white tennis outfit, her expression souring when she saw me. "What do you want, Andrew?" "5 minutes of your time," I said. "Please, this is important." She sighed dramatically but stepped aside to let me in. Her house was exactly as I'd imagined, everything white and chrome and expensive looking, with fresh flowers in crystal vases and not a single item out of place. We sat in her living room. I stayed perched on the edge of an uncomfortable modern chair while she settled onto her white leather couch. "Patricia, I'm not trying to cause problems," I started. "I genuinely believe this permit issue is serious. If you apply for the permits now, it'll cost some money and probably delay construction, but it's better than the alternative." "And what alternative is that?" she asked icily. "The county finding out on their own. Then we're looking at stop work orders, fines, possible demolition, and a lot of bad publicity. She leaned forward. Let me explain something to you, Andrew. I've been running this HOA for 5 years. I know what I'm doing. This community was a disaster before I took over. People had boats parked in driveways, houses painted unapproved colors, yards full of weeds. I brought order. I brought property values up 20%. I'm not questioning your dedication, I said carefully. I'm questioning this specific decision. The pool house is being built by a licensed contractor who assured me all necessary requirements are being met, she said firmly. I trust his expertise over your amateur internet research. Did you specifically ask him about county permits? She stood up. This conversation is over. If you continue to harass me or spread misinformation about HOA projects, I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action for defamation. I stood too, my jaw tight. Patricia, I'm trying to help. No, you're trying to undermine my authority because you can't handle being held accountable for your own violations. Now, please leave my home. I left, knowing exactly what I had to do next. That afternoon, I filed a formal complaint with Maricopa County Development Services. I included photos, construction timeline, the address, and all relevant information. The woman I spoke with said an inspector would be assigned to investigate within a week. 6 days later, I was working from home when I heard shouting from the direction of the pool. I looked out my back window and saw a county vehicle parked near the construction site. A man in khakis and a county polo shirt was talking to the construction foreman while another man took photos of the half-built structure. I grabbed my phone and walked down there, staying at a distance but close enough to hear. I don't care what the HOA president told you, the inspector was saying. You can't build a structure this size without permits, period. I'm issuing a stop work order effective immediately. The foreman held up his hands. Hey, I'm just the contractor. The client told me everything was handled. Well, it wasn't. You're licensed, right? You should have verified permits before you started. The foreman's face reddened. I asked about it. She said the HOA was handling all permits and approvals. The HOA doesn't issue building permits. The county does. The inspector slapped an orange notice onto one of the wooden frames. All work stops now. If I see any activity on this site before proper permits are obtained, the fines start at $1,000 per day. I walked back to my house, a mixture of vindication and dread churning in my stomach. I'd been right, but this was going to get ugly. It took Patricia less than an hour to figure out who'd reported her. She came storming up to my front door and pounded on it so hard I thought she might break her hand. I opened it to find her face purple with rage. You reported us to the county, she shrieked. I reported illegal construction, I said calmly. Someone had to. Do you have any idea what you've done? The contractor is threatening to sue us. We've already spent $80,000. The permits and fees could cost another $15,000 and delay everything by months. Then you should have gotten them before you started building, I said. I will destroy you, she hissed. I will fine you for every microscopic violation. I will make your life in this community a living hell. You already do that, Patricia. This isn't about me. This is about you thinking the rules don't apply to you. She jabbed a finger at my chest. I'm going to call an emergency board meeting. We're going to levy a special assessment on every homeowner to cover the cost of your sabotage. The county shut you down for breaking the law. That's not sabotage. That's consequences. She spun on her heel and marched away, pulling out her phone and already dialing someone. Within 2 hours, I had an email notification about an emergency HOA board meeting scheduled for that evening. The subject line read, Special Assessment Vote Due to County Interference. I showed up to Patricia's house at 7 p.m. to find the dining room packed. Word had spread fast and at least 20 homeowners had shown up, way more than usual. People were angry, confused, and demanding answers. Patricia stood at the head of the table, trying to maintain her composure. Carol and Dennis flanked her, both looking miserable. Everyone, please, let's maintain order, Patricia called out over the chatter. I've called this meeting to address the malicious complaint filed against our pool house project. Malicious? Called out James Bradford, an accountant who lived 3 houses down from me. I heard the county said you never got permits. Permits are a bureaucratic formality that we are now being forced to obtain due to one individual's vendetta. Patricia said sharply, glaring at me. Andrew Williams reported us to the county purely to sabotage a project that would benefit the entire community. Maria Chen stood up. But did you get permits or not? Patricia's jaw clenched. The contractor assured us that all legal requirements were being met. That's not what I asked, Maria persisted. Did the HOA apply for county building permits before construction started? The room went quiet, everyone staring at Patricia. We began the architectural and planning process, Patricia said carefully. The contractor indicated he would handle the technical permitting requirements. Dennis suddenly spoke up, his voice quiet but clear. That's not true, Patricia. Everyone turned to look at him. Patricia's eyes widened. Dennis, what are you talking about? She said, her voice dangerously soft. Dennis pulled out a folder from his briefcase. I've been the treasurer for 3 years. I have every email, every invoice, every document related to this project. There was never any discussion of permits. You told the contractor explicitly that the HOA would handle all approvals and that county permits weren't necessary for improvements to community property. That is absolutely false, Patricia snapped. Dennis opened the folder and pulled out printed emails. This is from you to the contractor, dated March 15th. I quote, "As discussed, the HOA board has full authority over community improvements. County permits are not required for work performed on HOA common areas. Please proceed with the project as outlined." The room erupted in angry voices. Patricia's face went from red to white. "Those emails are taken out of context," she stammered. "There's more," Dennis continued, and I could hear the suppressed anger in his voice now. "You told me the project was budgeted at $175,000. The actual contracted amount is $240,000. You hid $65,000 in expenses by miscategorizing them in the budget reports." "How dare you?" Patricia breathed. "I dare because I'm legally liable as treasurer if the county finds financial irregularities," Dennis shot back. "You've been using the reserve fund like your personal checking account. The pool house contractor? It's your brother-in-law's company. You gave him the contract without competitive bidding, which violates our own bylaws." The room exploded into chaos. People were shouting questions, demanding answers, pulling out phones to record. Patricia tried to speak over them, but couldn't. Carol suddenly stood up. "I'm resigning from the board effective immediately." She grabbed her purse and walked out, pushing through the crowd. James Bradford's voice cut through the noise. "I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in the HOA president." "You can't do that," Patricia said desperately. "Actually, we can," Maria said, pulling up something on her phone. "Article 7, Section 3 of our HOA bylaws. A vote of no confidence may be initiated by petition of 15% of homeowners and requires a majority vote to remove a board member." "We have at least 20 homeowners here right now," James said. "That's more than 15%. All in favor of initiating a no confidence vote, raise your hand." Every hand in the room went up, except Patricia's, and one elderly woman who looked confused about what was happening. "This is a witch hunt," Patricia said, her voice shaking now. "Everything I've done has been for this community." "You committed fraud," Dennis said flatly. "You lied about permits, hid expenses, gave contracts to family members, and violated our governing documents. I'm not just voting you out, I'm reporting this to the county attorney's office." Patricia grabbed her papers and shoved past people toward the door. "Fine. You want to run this community? Go ahead. See how far you get without me. This place will fall apart in 6 months." She slammed the door behind her. The room sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then, James spoke up. "Okay, we need to handle this properly. Dennis, you're the only board member left. What's the process for emergency leadership?" Dennis rubbed his face tiredly. "According to bylaws, in the absence of a president and vice president, the treasurer assumes interim authority until a special election can be held. That election has to happen within 30 days. "What about the pool house?" someone asked. "We have to get the permits," I said. "There's no way around it. And we need to get a full accounting of what's been spent and what's still owed." Dennis nodded. "I'll work on that tomorrow. But there's another problem. If Patricia really did commit fraud with HOA funds, we might need to pursue legal action to recover money and protect the association from liability." "How much are we talking?" Maria asked. Dennis flipped through his folder. "From what I can document so far, at least $65,000 in misappropriated or misrepresented expenses. but I need to do a complete audit. Over the next few weeks, the full scope of Patricia's misconduct came to light. Dennis worked with an independent auditor and discovered that Patricia had been skimming from HOA funds for nearly 2 years. The pool house was just the most blatant example. She'd approved multiple contracts to companies owned by relatives and friends, always without competitive bidding. She charged personal expenses to the HOA credit card and buried them in vague line items like community maintenance and administrative costs. In total, the auditor estimated she'd misappropriated close to $150,000. Dennis filed a report with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. I spent hours being interviewed by investigators, providing my documentation and timeline of the pool house construction. Meanwhile, we had to deal with the practical mess Patricia had left behind. The half-built pool house sat under a county stop work order. The contractor was threatening to sue for the remaining balance on his contract, and the community was deeply divided between people who believed Patricia had been wronged and those who wanted her prosecuted. I ended up getting elected to the new HOA board in the special election, along with Maria and James. Dennis stayed on as treasurer. Our first priority was the pool house situation. We met with the contractor, Patricia's brother-in-law, whose name was Robert Remington. He was a stocky guy in his 50s with a permanent scowl. "You owe me $160,000, he stated flatly at our first meeting. "I've got a signed contract." "You built without permits," James countered. "You're a licensed contractor. You should have known better." Patricia told me she'd handled everything. I trusted her. "You're related to her," Maria pointed out, "and you got this contract without competitive bidding, which violates HOA rules. If anything, you owe us money back." The meeting went nowhere. Robert threatened litigation. We told him to go ahead. Our lawyer said we had a strong case that the contract was invalid due to the conflict of interest and permit violations. While that played out, I worked with the county to get proper permits for the pool house. It was a nightmare of paperwork, engineering reports, and fees. The architect had to revise the plans 3 times to meet county codes. The whole process took 4 months and cost $22,000 in fees and revisions. During those months, Patricia stayed holed up in her house. She'd stopped attending community events, stopped her morning walks, stopped everything. Her lawn started getting shaggy, which would have been ironic if it wasn't so sad. Then, one morning in August, I woke up to police cars on her street. I walked down with a growing sense of unease. 2 Scottsdale police cruisers sat in her driveway, along with an unmarked sedan. I saw Patricia being led out in handcuffs, her face tear-streaked, her usual perfect appearance disheveled. She was wearing sweatpants and an old T-shirt, her hair uncombed. An officer I recognized from the neighborhood watch meetings saw me and walked over. "Andrew Williams, right?" he said. "Yeah, what's happening?" "County attorney filed criminal charges. Fraud, embezzlement, theft. It's related to the HOA stuff." My stomach dropped. I'd wanted accountability, not this. "Is she being arrested?" "Arraignments this afternoon. Her bail will probably be set then." He lowered his voice. "Between you and me, she's looking at serious time if convicted. We're talking over $150,000 in stolen funds from a homeowners association. That's a Class 2 felony in Arizona." I watched them put her in the back of the cruiser. She looked at me through the window, her expression not angry, but broken, defeated. I felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and guilt. The arrest made the local news. Scottsdale HOA president arrested for embezzlement ran on every channel. Reporters came to the neighborhood interviewing homeowners, filming the half-built pool house. Our community became a cautionary tale about HOA corruption and unchecked power. Patricia's husband, a quiet man named Gerald who worked in medical device sales, put their house up for sale 2 weeks after her arrest. I saw him once, loading boxes into his car. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. "Mr. Remington," I called out, walking over. "I'm sorry about all this." He looked at me with hollow eyes. "Are you? You're the one who started it." "I reported illegal construction. I didn't know about the embezzlement." "She's not a bad person," he said quietly. "She just got obsessed with controlling everything. It became like an addiction. The power, the authority. She couldn't stop herself." "I hope she gets help," I said, and I meant it. He just shook his head and went back to loading boxes. The legal process dragged on for months. Patricia's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the county attorney's office was pushing for prison time. The case became something of a crusade for them, an example that even small-scale white-collar crime had consequences. Meanwhile, we finally got the permits approved and work resumed on the pool house. We'd renegotiated the contract with Robert, who dropped his lawsuit when his own lawyer told him he'd probably lose. The revised agreement was for completion of the work at cost, with no profit margin for him. It was the best we could do. The pool house was finally finished in November, almost 10 months after construction had first started. It was beautiful, to be honest. Spacious changing rooms, clean bathrooms, a kitchenette for community events, and a large covered patio with ceiling fans. Everything we'd originally wanted. We held a community opening event on a Saturday afternoon. About 40 homeowners showed up. There was catered food, music, kids swimming. It should have been a celebration, but there was a melancholy undertone to everything. This building represented such a mess, such division and conflict. Maria came up to me as I stood watching kids play in the pool. "You did the right thing," she said. "Did I?" I asked. "A woman's going to prison. A family is destroyed. Patricia made her choices. You just held her accountable. If you hadn't, she'd still be stealing from us." "I know. I just wonder if there was a better way." "There wasn't," Maria said firmly. "You tried talking to her. You tried warning her. She chose to double down instead of coming clean." In January, almost a year after the construction had first started, Patricia Remington stood before a judge in Maricopa County Superior Court. I attended the sentencing hearing, sitting in the gallery with Dennis and James. Patricia's lawyer made an impassioned plea for leniency. She'd repaid $75,000 of the stolen funds by selling her house. She'd been in therapy. She'd expressed deep remorse. She had no prior criminal record. The county prosecutor argued that her position of trust made the crime worse, not better. She'd stolen from her neighbors, people who'd trusted her with their money. She'd shown no remorse until she was caught. She'd lied repeatedly and tried to retaliate against whistleblowers. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened to both sides. Then she spoke directly to Patricia. "Mrs. Remington, you held a position of significant trust in your community. Instead of honoring that trust, you exploited it for personal gain. You enriched yourself and your family members at the expense of your neighbors. When confronted, you didn't come clean. You attacked the person who questioned you. You showed a pattern of deception that went on for years." Patricia was crying, her whole body shaking. "However," the judge continued, "I also recognize that you've begun making restitution and that this appears to be aberrant behavior rather than a criminal pattern. Therefore, I'm sentencing you to 3 years in prison with all but 6 months suspended. You'll serve 6 months in county jail, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You're also ordered to pay full restitution of $150,000, of which $75,000 has already been paid. Finally, you're prohibited from serving in any fiduciary capacity, including HOA boards, for a period of 10 years. Patricia sobbed as the bailiff led her away. Her husband sat in the front row, his face in his hands. I left the courthouse feeling numb. 6 months in jail and 5 years of probation seemed both too harsh and too lenient at the same time. Over the next few months, life in Sunset Ridge Estates slowly returned to normal. We elected a permanent HOA board. The new president was a retired schoolteacher named Helen, who ran meetings with calm efficiency and radical transparency. Every expense over $500 required board approval with documentation. Every contract went through competitive bidding. Monthly financial reports were posted online for all homeowners to review. The pool house became the heart of community activities. We started hosting monthly potlucks there, movie nights for kids, holiday parties. It became what Patricia had originally claimed it would be, a genuine improvement to our community. But the path to get there had cost us so much more than the construction budget. I saw Patricia one time after her sentencing. It was the following summer, and I was at a Home Depot in Scottsdale. She was in the garden section looking at plants. She'd lost weight. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a plain t-shirt. Nothing like the polished, imperious woman who used to rule our neighborhood. Our eyes met across the aisle of ferns and ornamental grasses. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she walked over. "Andrew," she said quietly. "Patricia, I'm living with my sister in Tempe now. Gerald and I are divorced. I'm sorry." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Are you really?" I thought about it. "Yeah, actually, I am. I never wanted this." "You just wanted to build an illegal pool house without consequences?" "No, I wanted you to get permits before building an illegal pool house." She was quiet for a moment, looking down at her hands. "I know, you were right. About all of it." She looked up and I saw tears in her eyes. I got so caught up in being in charge, in being the one who made things happen, that I stopped caring about doing things the right way. I just wanted results. I wanted to be important. "You could have been," I said. "You did good things for the community. The property values really did go up. The neighborhood looks better." "But I ruined it all by cutting corners and lying." She wiped her eyes. "I start a new job Monday. Retail, minimum wage. It's humbling." "I hope things work out for you," I said, and I meant it. "Me too." She picked up a small, succulent plant. "I'm starting small this time, just trying to keep one plant alive, you know?" I watched her walk away to the checkout line. This woman who'd once wielded power over an entire community like a queen, now just another person buying a plant at Home Depot on a Saturday afternoon. That evening, I sat on my back patio under the pergola I'd built years ago, the one that had required all those permits and approvals. I could hear music and laughter drifting from the pool house where someone was hosting a birthday party. Kids were playing, adults were chatting, and the community that had been torn apart was slowly knitting itself back together. The whole saga had taught me things I hadn't wanted to learn about power, accountability, and the thin line between civic duty and revenge. I'd started out just wanting someone to follow the rules they'd forced everyone else to follow. I'd ended up being the catalyst for a woman's complete destruction. Was it worth it? I still wasn't sure. The pool house was beautiful and well used. Patricia had been stopped from stealing more money from her neighbors. The HOA was now run with transparency and integrity. Those were all good outcomes. But there was also a family destroyed, a woman in jail, and a community that had learned its neighbors could turn on each other with vicious speed when money and power were involved. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was the monthly HOA financial report, showing every dollar spent and received, with detailed receipts and documentation. I smiled slightly. At least something good had come from all of this. A few months later, we had a community meeting to discuss using some of the reserve fund to upgrade the playground equipment. Helen ran the meeting with Robert's Rules of Order, taking public comment, allowing debate, and ultimately putting it to a vote. The measure passed, and we formed a committee to research options and get competitive bids from 3 different vendors. It was boring, bureaucratic, and exactly how it should have been done. After the meeting, Dennis pulled me aside. "Hey, wanted to give you an update. Patricia finished her jail sentence last week. She's on probation now, working at a Target in Tempe." "How do you know?" "I ran into her at a coffee shop. We talked for a bit." He shrugged. She seemed different, quieter, maybe a little wiser. "Did she ask about the community?" "Yeah, I told her the pool house was getting great use." She smiled at that, said she was glad something good came out of the whole mess. We stood there in the parking lot, watching homeowners chat and laugh as they headed to their cars. "Do you ever regret reporting her?" Dennis asked. I'd asked myself that question 100 times. No, she was breaking the law and stealing from people. Someone had to stop her. Even knowing what it cost her? Even then, she made her choices. I made mine. I looked at the pool house, lights glowing warmly in the evening darkness. Besides, if I hadn't reported it, we'd probably have a condemned building sitting there right now, or worse. Dennis nodded slowly. "You're probably right. County would have found out eventually. And then the fines would have been worse, the penalties more severe. At least this way we controlled the narrative somewhat." We said our goodbyes, and I drove home, parking in my driveway and sitting for a moment before going inside. My grass was exactly 3 inches tall. I'd measured it that morning. Life in an HOA was strange. We paid money to an organization that existed to enforce rules we'd agreed to, theoretically for the benefit of everyone. But put the wrong person in charge, give them unchecked authority, and it could all go wrong so quickly. Patricia had been that wrong person. She'd started with good intentions, I genuinely believed that. But power without accountability had corrupted her judgment inch by inch until she was committing felonies and convinced she was in the right. I'd been the accountability, the whistleblower, the guy who said the emperor had no clothes. It hadn't made me popular with everyone. There were still some homeowners who thought I'd been petty and vindictive, who believed Patricia had been unfairly persecuted. They gave me cold looks at community events and made snide comments about busybodies and snitches. But most people were grateful. The financial audit had shown them how much money had been wasted and stolen. The new transparent leadership made them feel secure that their HOA dues were being used properly. And the pool house itself was a daily reminder that doing things the right way, even when it was slower and more expensive, produced better results. As the months turned into a year, and then 2 years, the drama of the pool house scandal faded into community lore. New families moved in who'd never met Patricia Remington and only knew the story secondhand. The pool house was just the nice building by the pool, no longer a symbol of corruption and downfall. I stayed on the HOA board for 2 terms, 4 years total. I chaired the Architectural Review Committee, the same committee that had once made me jump through hoops for my pergola. I tried to be fair but thorough, approving projects that met the guidelines and working with homeowners to modify plans that didn't. I like to think I learned from Patricia's mistakes. I listened when people disagreed with me. I followed procedures even when they were inconvenient. I never gave contracts to friends or family. I remained vigilant about permits and legal compliance. One afternoon, about 3 years after the whole mess started, I was reviewing an application for a homeowner who wanted to build a detached garage. The plans were thorough. The design matched our architectural standards, and he'd already started the county permit process. I was going to recommend approval. As I typed up my recommendation, I thought about how different this was from Patricia's approach. She would have either rubber-stamped it without review or denied it arbitrarily based on personal dislike of the homeowner. She'd wielded her authority like a weapon, not a responsibility. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Andrew? Is Patricia Remington? I sat up straight, surprised. Patricia, hi. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I got your number from Dennis. It's fine. How are you? I'm doing better. I finished probation last month. I'm managing a target now. Actually got promoted. She laughed, and it sounded more genuine than I remembered. It's not running an HOA, but it turns out I'm decent at retail management. That's great. I'm happy for you. Look, I'm calling because I'm in a program, part of my therapy. Making amends, taking responsibility, all that. And I needed to call you specifically. I waited. You were right, she said simply. About all of it. The permits, the spending, the way I ran things. I was a tyrant and a thief, and I convinced myself I was serving the community. You tried to warn me and I attacked you for it. I'm sorry. The apology caught me off guard. I appreciate that. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I did and why it was wrong. You didn't ruin my life. I did that myself. We talked for a few more minutes. She told me she was dating someone, a normal guy who worked in IT and had never heard of HOAs before meeting her. She was taking business ethics classes at community college, thinking about maybe getting a degree. She sounded healthier than I'd ever heard her. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. Closure was a strange thing. I'd never expected to get it, certainly not from Patricia herself. That weekend, we had a community barbecue at the pool house. I brought potato salad and stood around the grill with James and Dennis, drinking beers and watching kids splash in the water. You ever think about how crazy things got? James asked, flipping burgers. Sometimes, I admitted. Seems like a lifetime ago now. Helen's been a great president, Dennis said. Boring, but in a good way. We laughed. Boring was exactly what an HOA should be. Predictable, transparent, fair, not dramatic, not corrupt, not a source of neighborhood warfare. As the sun set over Scottsdale, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I looked around at my community. People chatting and laughing, kids playing, the pool house serving its intended purpose. We'd gone through fire to get here, but we'd come out the other side stronger and wiser. The pool house stood as a monument to both Patricia's ambition and her downfall. It was beautiful and functional, but it had cost so much more than anyone had intended, not just in money, but in relationships, reputations, and trust. I like to think we all learned something from the experience. The homeowners learned to pay attention to what their HOA was doing with their money. The board members learned that transparency wasn't optional. And I learned that sometimes doing the right thing comes with a heavy cost, but you do it anyway because the alternative is worse. Patricia had started building that pool house without permits because she thought she was above the rules. The county inspector had other plans, and so did I. Together, we'd enforced accountability on someone who'd forgotten what that word meant. Was the outcome perfect? No. Was justice fully served? That was debatable. Patricia had paid a steep price, but she'd also stolen a lot of money and abused a lot of trust. The community had gotten its pool house and its financial reforms, but it had also been torn apart and was still healing. Life is messy like that. There are rarely clean victories or clear-cut villains. Patricia Remington had been a person who made terrible choices and paid for them. I'd been a person who'd insisted on accountability and lived with the consequences of that insistence. We'd both changed because of what happened. As I helped clean up after the barbecue, carrying paper plates to the trash and folding up chairs, Helen came over. "Andrew, I wanted to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For having the courage to speak up 3 years ago. This community is better because you did." I shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just wanted permits pulled. You wanted integrity, and you fought for it even when it was hard. That matters." Maybe she was right. Maybe the whole painful saga had been worth it for the principle of the thing. Rules apply to everyone, or they apply to no one. Authority without accountability leads to corruption. Transparency protects everyone. These were simple lessons, but apparently we all needed to learn them the hard way. I drove home that night, feeling more at peace than I had in years. The pool house was built. Patricia was rebuilding her life. The community was thriving under honest leadership. And I could look at myself in the mirror knowing I'd done the right thing, even when it was difficult. Sometimes that's all you can ask for. Not a perfect outcome, but an honest effort. Not a happy ending for everyone, but justice as best as you can manage it. The pool house lights glowed in my rearview mirror as I pulled into my driveway. Tomorrow there would be more HOA business to handle, more applications to review, more minutia of community governance. It would be boring and bureaucratic and exactly as it should be, and if I ever saw someone building something without proper permits again, I'd speak up just as quickly, because that's what you do when you live in a community. You hold people accountable, you follow the rules, and you try to make things a little better than you found them, even if it costs you something, even if it's hard, even if the consequences are more than you bargained for. You do it anyway, because the alternative is letting corruption and dishonesty win. And I'd seen where that path led. I'd watched a woman destroy herself and her family because she thought power meant she didn't have to follow the same rules as everyone else. The county inspector had shown her otherwise, and so had I. 3 years later, that lesson still resonated through Sunset Ridge Estates, in the monthly financial reports, in the competitive bidding processes, in the careful attention to permits and procedures. We'd paid a high price for that education, but we'd learned it well. As I unlocked my front door and stepped into my house, I could hear the faint sound of music from the pool area. Another community event, more neighbors gathering, more normal life in a place that had almost been torn apart. The pool house Patricia Remington had tried to build without permits stood complete, legal, and serving its purpose. It just took the long way to get there, through scandal and arrests and community upheaval. But it got there, and so did we.